So today is Veterans Day, and I want to talk a little bit about Veterans Day. Um, this holiday, and it's a federal holiday, was known as Veterans Day beginning in 1954. Before that, it was known as Armistice Day. And Armistice Day was, of course, the day that marked the end of the Great War, or World War One, which ended on the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. And so Armistice Day came about. World War One ended. The Great War ended because of America, and we were able to bring that war to a successful conclusion by our military might and our diplomacy. And our diplomacy was based on fairness, on right principles, um, and on a desire for peace, and also trying to build a community of nations. If you take a look at the casualties of World War One, it's just stunning. There were about 10 million military members of all the armies and navies that were killed. There were about 9 million civilians who died. So if you triple that number, you've got roughly 60 million casualties over a 4 year period. That's 40,000 casualties a day. I mean, that's staggering. 40,000, that's a city every day is destroyed um, because of this war. And so, why did these countries fight? And they fought for power, they fought for glory, they fought for land, they fought for money. Um, and they lost sight of the fact that these were their fellow human beings that were being slaughtered. Uh, you know, these countries, the aggressor countries, were ruled by monarchs, tyrants, dictators. Um, they played to nationalism. All the parties did. They played to nationalism. Nationalism fueled the killing. They also, too, didn't really care about religion. They didn't care about Christianity. The popes, both Pius X and Benedict XV, appealed to them to stop. They didn't care about religion. In fact, religion actually helped to fuel a lot of the killing in World War One. And so it was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. Cordell Hull, writing about 25 years after the end of the war, he said, we realize that nationalism is a very dangerous thing, and that what we have to do is we have to open up the borders between countries. We have to encourage free trade and friendship between people. And so he saw um, very clearly that nationalism, this idea of this group, could be weaponized and lead to much more fighting. And so he saw that happen in World War II, which was, of course, various types of nationalism, particularly German nationalism, that was used to send men into combat and wage the war, and a war that was started by Hitler, a bloody, horrible war. And so what Cordell Hull was saying is, we can't have this. We have to basically make everybody brothers, help everybody work together. We do that by reducing the influence of nationalism, by trading with each other, and working with each other. So that's what Americans understood that, and what Americans also tried to do, as reflected in this letter from Secretary of State Robert Lansing from 1917, was to try to reach a diplomatic peace on fair terms, on right principles. And so he wrote a letter. He said, quote, "The purposes of the United States in this war are known to the whole world, to every people to whom the truth has been permitted to come. They do not need to be stated again. We seek no material advantage of any kind." America wanted no material advantage. We didn't want to occupy land. We didn't want money. We want no material advantage of any kind, from Secretary of State Robert Lansing. We believe that the intolerable wrongs done in this war by the furious and brutal power of the Imperial German government, which was the Kaiser who went into Belgium and he completely disregarded the Treaty of Neutrality, ought to be repaired, but not at the expense of the sovereignty of any people, rather a vindication of the sovereignty both of those that are weak and those that are strong. So the weak and the strong countries would have their sovereignty protected. Punitive damage, dismemberment of empires, establishment of selfish and exclusive economic leagues, we deem inexpedient. and in the end, worse than futile. No proper basis for a peace of any kind, least of all for an enduring peace. That must be based upon justice and fairness and the common rights of mankind. Very powerful. That was the American position. August 1917, Robert Lansing, Secretary of State. He went on to say, but we cannot take the word of the present rulers of Germany as a guarantee of anything that is to endure unless explicitly supported by such conclusive evidence of the will and the purpose of the German people themselves. Now, end of quote. Now, it's significant for a number of reasons. He establishes here this idea that democracies don't wage war against each other. That's the general rule. They just don't. Um, and that is because democracies rely on the people to make that decision. Because all power rests with the people. That was something Suarez wrote about, Bellarmine wrote about. That is something which the American founders put in the Declaration of Independence, talking about the powers that are given from the people to the political entity, to the government. And remember from the Constitution, the Ninth Amendment reserves certain powers to the people. Not all those powers are given to the government. And the same with the 10th Amendment. Not all the powers are given to the government, to the federal government, from the states. And the same with the Ninth Amendment. Not all the powers are given to the federal government. The people retain some of those powers. So to make sure that there wouldn't be another war, Woodrow Wilson came up with 14 points that came out in January 1918. And there are 4 points of the 14-point program I want to bring out. One is open diplomacy without secret treaties, economic free trade on the seas during war and peace, equal trade conditions, creation of the League of Nations. So America's always known that if you trade with people, you work with people, it's a Hamiltonian idea, you're going to make friends. Because what you're doing is you're sharing the produce and the goods, the products, the manufactured, the creations of each of the society with everyone else. And so you are spreading these goods around the world. And in the process, you're making friends and you're building up relations and communications with different peoples. So the creation of the League of Nations was something that Wilson and America wanted. And the creation of the League of Nations was a manifestation of the Catholic idea of the community of nations. It was something that Christianity had always called for. It was something that mankind had always called for, and the natural law called for. And here is America advancing it in 1918. The crowned heads of Europe, the nation states of Europe, they couldn't do it. But America could. And that's because we had those 4 organizing principles which organize our domestic society and our outlook on the world that I've talked about previously. And that is 1, primacy of the person. 2, there's a community of states or countries, community of nations, if you will. 3, the rule of law by which to govern relations between the states and with people. And 4, that peace is the natural objective, the natural goal of mankind. So America was advancing these principles on the world scene in 1918. And where did all this come from? It came from Amer de Vattel, his Law of Nations, which was widely read by the founders. And the Law of Nations was picked up and carried on throughout American society, American jurisprudence, all the way up to today. Chancellor James Kent was one of the key carriers of these ideas through the 1800s. It went to Elihu Root, James Brown Scott. It went on to Robert Lansing, Cordell Hull, Philip Jessup, and onward. Just goes on from there. And these ideas of the natural law shaped our view of society, both domestically and foreign. And what Vattel wrote as a teaching point here is he said, quote, object of the natural society established between all mankind is that they should lend each other mutual assistance in order to attain perfection themselves. Each individual nation is bound to contribute everything in her power to the happiness and perfection of all the others. This idea infused America's viewpoint of the world and also within the country. Because remember, we were started by 13 little countries. Okay, the 13 colonies became 13 states, became 13 little countries, that became one nation. Okay, so This is part of America's DNA, if you will. Okay. And George Washington, 1793, when he gave a talk about possibility of weighing in on either Great Britain's side or France's side in the war that was going on, said, we must, quote, observe good faith and justice towards all nations, cultivate peace and harmony with all. And then he went on to say, it will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and in no distant period a great nation to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by an exalted justice and benevolence. End of quote. And that has been America for more than 200 some years. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you.